It's much easier to just gradually steal people's wealth and blame it on that foreign dictator or that war or the billionaires or greedy business people. None of those things are true. It is just the money printer. The central banks cause the booms and busts by their actions, but they'll justify their presence to protect us against the booms and the busts. It is just absolutely ludicrous. If we were going to sit down and play a board game right now, you and me, and I got to change the rules whenever I want, who's going to win that board game? Why would you let somebody do that with the money? You're inevitably going to lose. It's the peaceful opt-out into a new system where the whole world is working 24/7 to increase your purchasing power. The natural consequence of game theory here is you use the money printer to print money to buy Bitcoin because it's the only way out. The world is going to Bitcoin. So you are incredibly well positioned to make a real difference. The strategic Bitcoin reserve for any country should be the Bitcoin that its population holds, not what the government holds. Print fiat currency to buy Bitcoin and then put that Bitcoin in the hands of everyone in the population, not on the balance sheet of the central bank.
You made a video that was for a few days all over my feed. I think even like really big ones like Michael Seyr and all of those have kind of retweeted and kind of shared it in their audiences. And I loved the phrasing of it. There was no Bitcoin in it. There was like no Bitcoin in the title. So you're just like, oh, like what's the problem? How did it come to that video, and how did it come to that?
It was very much an accidental creation, Robin. I would say that up front. And I couldn't have expected the level of response from the Bitcoin community, and to end up having Michael Saylor post it and Bryan Armstrong basically state that Bitcoin is a moral imperative in response to the video. And, that's like fairy tale stuff. And I'm blown away by it, and I'm very grateful to everyone in the community for taking the time to watch it. And if you haven't watched it, please do watch it, and then share it with your friends. But I didn't set out to create a video. I just wanted to put together a presentation for some friends because I was attending. I was invited to a weekend away by a friend, and he invited 15 of us. I didn't know anyone else going, and he asked us all to bring something to talk about. And I wanted to talk about Bitcoin, but only half an hour. And so I wanted to put something together where the aim of the 30 minutes was not to teach people about Bitcoin, but to have them at the end of the 30 minutes want to learn about Bitcoin. And so, perfect.
Yeah, I just wanted to put it up there so people can easily find it. It's called "What's the Problem? Demystifying Why We All Need Bitcoin" from Joe Bryan. So we have Joe Bryan here for those who are wondering, and that's it's a really great video, and it speaks volumes that from out of nowhere the video made so much waves in the Bitcoin community. So it's something that you kind of should look at because it might be a really good orange pilling material for people that are like, oh, like why even bother looking into Bitcoin. So I like what you did there.
Yeah, thank you. It's I just I knew I was on the right sort of track, and I was excited about giving the presentation to this group of people who I'd never met before. But the reaction was like something I've never had before, because you spend a lot of time talking to people about Bitcoin and trying to evangelize and help them have the penny drop for themselves. Right. But we sort of all come at it from different angles depending on the person we're speaking to, and quite often we just talk past people because we're so far down the rabbit hole. Communicating effectively back with somebody who hasn't even got a mental framework on which to hang some of the concepts and some of the issues that you're flagging to them as being the rationale why you are a Bitcoiner. It just makes it very, very hard. And so, yeah, this video is the sort of thing you can send to your mom or dad or your grandparent or your child, and you can sit down and watch it, and they don't need to know anything about anything other than just being a human being and experiencing the world around them. And they go from, talking about, because we don't even frame it as Bitcoin. It's just, what's the problem? And Bitcoin is only mentioned right at the end. And so by going through it, you begin to understand why the world around you is the way it is. And what the issue at the heart of everything is. And once you understand what the issue is, then and you do this through a series of logical steps that you do as the viewer. It's not being told, it's a story, and every stage you're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense, that makes sense. And then you end up in a situation where it's very clear something is wrong. Right. And now I've in my own head, as somebody who knows nothing about Bitcoin, recognizes there's a problem. My next question is, okay, well, what's the solution? And that's when you introduce Bitcoin.
I love that approach because I think a lot of people are not aware of the problem. Like a lot of people are still like, oh, like, nah, it's fine. We have inflation, but it's just temporary, and like it will come down. And like they are not aware of the real underlying problem. They still say like, oh, like yeah, of course we have some war in Ukraine. That's why we have inflation, stuff like that. I, they notice inflation. Obviously, people are not stupid, but they kind of it's not in front of their mind what the real problem is, and why they should now look into a solution. They don't even look for a solution. They might look for like, oh, like maybe I should have a salary increase and stuff like that, but not at the real cause of it.
Absolutely. And people are accepting of inflation. Now, inflation, have been in the water that's gradually boiling for so long that people have no conception of a world that didn't have inflation. It's almost like an inflation is just a natural state of the world. And so, yeah, it eats away our savings, but that's just the way it is, because that's the natural state. But it's absolutely not the case that it's the natural state. It's an engineered state. Um, and the video helps people go from understanding where inflation comes from, and then seeing what the consequences are that then impact their own lives, which are second order, third order, which they would have no idea about, connecting the dots back to inflation and ultimately back to the money printer. And so the story is about, an island that splits in two, and on one side you've got Satoshi and perfect money, and the other side you've got Fiatello, who has perfect money, but he has a big red button, and he can press the button whenever he wants to change aspects of the money, and basically just keeps pressing it and printing more money for the government. And then the whole island just, you have this cascading effect of this, then this, then this, and you end up in a position where it just looks like today. It's just like today, and then people are suddenly like, okay, well, it's the money printer. It's the fact the government has this big red button is where the inflation comes from. This is an active choice. This is not the natural state of the free market. And so, like, once you make that connection, which is much easier in story form, and you have the mental picture of like a Pixar character pressing a big red button and changing stuff. It's much easier to sort of abstract away the inner workings of the complexities of the financial system behind that little image than it is, to try and explain how banking system works, and, quantitative easing and, debasement and all of these things. But yeah, inflation is just insidious and it destroys everything. But people just are used to it. They think it's natural. And that's the biggest challenge here. If we can wake people up to that, then everything else flows naturally, because you and I both know is that once you reach that firm understanding, you inevitably end at Bitcoin. Inevitably. It's just a question of.
There are so many interesting questions in there because if we look at how they like, first of all, I'm shocked that they still accept fiat. But then it's like, oh, like what needs to happen that the general population is no longer accepting fiat? Like, what is the inflation rate? We still have in Turkey like massive inflation, or in other countries, even like Argentina, where they just invent new currencies every 5, 10 years, and people just accept it. It's kind of shocking. What has to happen that people go like, oh, fiat obviously is bad.
Well, single digit inflation rates don't trigger protests in the streets. And, it's much easier to just gradually steal people's wealth and blame it on that foreign dictator or that war or the billionaires or greedy business people, all of these things, which, none of those things are true. It is just the money printer that is the source of inflation. But nobody alive today, apart from some people who are probably very old now, have a conception of what life was like before this was the case. Before the start of before 1971, or even before, when they started abusing the money printer and hadn't been found out yet. It's like it's such a foreign concept. But if it's not surprising that the population are just totally accepting of this, because A, it's complex, B, it's obfuscated from the population. C, no, you're not even educated in it. You're actively educated in the opposite direction by the state and modern economics. I mean, the concept that we have a series of men sat around the table. I say men because it is almost entirely men sat around the table deciding what monetary policy should be. Is and fixing the price of money to try and change inflation, which is a backdated measure, which is corrupted anyway, to try and ensure stability in the financial system while simultaneously stealing a small percentage of the purchasing power every single year from everybody. It's just ludicrous. I mean, it's the equivalent of doing, like living in Aztec times and sacrificing people to the, some of the weather gods or the sun or something. It's like, your framework and foundations for these things is just totally bonkers. Totally bonkers. The human intervention in the price of money causes the problems that they themselves hold up as the rationale for their existence, trying to solve them. So, the central banks cause the booms and busts by their actions, but they'll justify their presence to protect us against the booms and the busts. It's just absolutely ludicrous, but there is no foundation for the general population to understand that. And the state is clearly not motivated to educate anybody in the critical thinking around questioning this to any degree. And so, it has to be a bottom up movement. And, the natural roots end up in Bitcoin. The people who've gone down that rabbit hole and questioned these things and employed critical thinking. And there are a lot of us who have done it independently, right, and arrived at the same conclusion. It has to start from there. So, it's like my question, one of the things I've always thought about is like, how do we expand the Bitcoin bubble? How do you get as many people to that starting point with going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole as possible? Because once you start going down, like, you're never coming out again. You're never coming out again, and everyone will eventually get there. So let's just try and get there as quickly as possible with as many people as possible in as many different parts of the world as possible. And I hope the video is got some ways to help him.
What impact do you think money has on us humans, on us on the global society when we use fiat versus when we use Bitcoin?
I mean, it's corrosive. You can look at pretty much any aspect of our society, and it's worse than it was 20 years ago, 50 years ago. Everything. It corrupts decision making. If you corrupt the money, you corrupt the price signals. And if your price signals are corrupted, everything. You can't make a decision with confidence. Your decision making is led by the system, and you're constantly trying to protect yourself against the system. If you figured it out, and if you haven't figured it out, you're just trying to survive in the best way you can, but you're constantly on the losing side. And it's just a question of how much you're losing by. Because you can never, unless you're connected to the money printer or connected to the people connected to the money printer, you cannot win in the system. It's only just a question of how much you're going to lose by. And it's not just the money, it impacts everything. Health, families, mentality, motivation, ethics, just everything, absolutely everything. But what would you expect when the center of everything is cancerous?
Yeah, and money we need every day. We transact with it. That's like it's almost like a language between human being. It's information, and uh, when this is disrupted, it's so fundamental. And I love how you described it of like if you're not the money printer or you don't have connection to the money printer, it's like a pyramid scheme where the closer you are to the money printer, the lower the cost for you to produce more money is, and the better your chances are to get ahead in life, which this shouldn't be money. That should not be the case of our fundamental monetary system.
Yeah, absolutely. And you I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, especially since launching the video, and not all of them within Bitcoin. And I've spoken to a number of people who are still very much in the fiat system, and you'd be, I don't know, I'll say you'd be surprised, but maybe you're not surprised. But like, someone even said to me, "But inflation's a good thing," and I just I almost like fell off my chair, and I was like, "Why? Why is that a good thing?" He said, "Well, without inflation, people wouldn't be encouraged to spend," and he's like, "Okay, but like, just question the principles behind that. Like, you think that the government being able to steal purchasing power is a good thing because it encourages people to try and get rid of their money as quickly as possible because it's decaying. Like, how is that? How is that a stable foundation for any long term real growth in any economy?" And I sort of framed it to them, because we watched the video, and I was, we can talk about a bit more of that conversation in a minute, but we watched the video, and in the video, Fiat teller's there pressing the big red button, and he basically gets to change the rules whenever he wants in the money. And I said to him, look, if we forget about the money, if we were going to sit down and play a board game right now, you and me, and I got to change the rules whenever I want, who's going to win that board game? And he said, well, you are, obviously. I say, okay, well, so who's going to lose? He said, I'm going to lose. Okay, so why would you let somebody do that with the money? You're inevitably going to lose unless you're in charge of the big red button. So how is that a stable basis for anything? And I think it's very hard to argue against that sort of simplification, because it doesn't matter that you can argue about this particular aspect or that particular aspect, but just structurally, you are going to lose. And so why would you ever want to play the game?
It's a beautiful explanation with the big red button. It makes it simple of people for understanding. Like, okay, that there's someone that can manipulate the game, because now they think, yeah, like it's normal. We kind of need that one instance that gives us the money. They don't think as the central bank as a normal actor in the game. They think as from the central bank as like almost a rule setter for the game, as the one that comes with it. But that's just a weird way to look at it. And the right way is to look at it. They are also just an organization. They are also just human beings. That they are all the same basically, just that they are for some reason allowed to manipulate our money. And the crazy thing is nowadays you don't even have to accept it. Like even if you're in the EU, where there's so many strict rules about everything, you can live completely unbanked. There are services where you can live on a Bitcoin standard, and when you have to pay someone like their landlord in the banking system or something like that, you just pay them with Lightning or with Bitcoin, gets transferred, and they get the euros in their own bank account. And so we already have an alternative. You can already opt out of the system, and you don't have to play by those rules. You don't have to play by the manipulated, by the rigged game that you have to lose. You hold euros, you will lose. You hold fiat, you will lose.
It's but it's a real challenge for people. And even within the Bitcoin community, it's very hard to live on the Bitcoin standard. Very, because tools, services, people willing to accept Bitcoin. It it's easier for some than others, and it's hard, when you have a family and, because there's, a whole different range of services and things like that and different countries that it then makes it very hard. But the fact that you can do that these days is fantastic, and more people will be able to do that over time as education increases, but also the ease of executing these things and the banking system. Hopefully, now that things have changed direction slightly in the US, or dramatically in the US, hopefully that now encourages Europe and the UK especially to adopt a less aggressive, less suicidal approach when it comes to, you know, um, their treatment of Bitcoin and the people who use Bitcoin. But I think the direction of travel overall globally is a good one. It's just going to take us time to get there. But to come back to what you were saying around, the central banks, I think people view them as being independent and as the rule setters, not an active participant in the system. Is that appeal to that higher authority, especially when you haven't done the work? It's like, I don't trust. People say, "Oh, I don't trust the government," but the central bank they're independent. They've got our best interests at heart. You know, but the reality is, the people who are in the central bank probably do feel that that is the case. Right? But the reality is they are human beings, and we are in a debt-based system, and they can't allow things to fail. And so, whenever something does go wrong, they're forced to pull the trigger and bail everybody out. And it's combination-ish, that psychological pressure on them. They're human beings. They also have assets. They have they have investments. They have families. They don't want to see those investments fall in value. You have the political pressure as well. And then, you have just the general social pressure. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. It's like Fiatello, and he has that big red button. There's a line where there's an incentive there, whether explicit or implicit, that he'll press the big red button at some point and just press and print the money. Is the fact that they have this ability means it will get used, because there will be an emergency at some point, which probably they have precipitated through previous actions, right? As it's like trying to steer a car. Yeah, it's like imagine trying to reverse a car in the dark on ice, where you all you get to see is the position of the car 2 minutes ago, right? And trying to keep control of it. That's basically what a central bank is doing. They're trying to set the price of money to minimize the variance in the economy by using backward-looking signals on a Keynesian framework that is just totally bonkers. And no wonder it's like constantly like, we'll tweak it this way, we'll tweak it this way. And you just introduce more and more oscillations in the system, and then you have to hit the big red button to bail everybody out. And then it's rinse and repeat. It's just a natural consequence of the system, but I don't think they individually would consider themselves to be bad actors. I think it's just the ability of them to have access to a big red button to change anything they want is something that should just not be the case.
It's amazing. I had yesterday the podcast with Nick, who's a system engineer, and he's really big on like how an airplane is staying stable, how a car is staying stable, and how things have natural stability. Like if you drive a car forward, even if you leave the steering wheel, it will naturally go in the one direction. It has a natural stability to it. And we talked about the same concept with Fiat. It has a naturally instability. It's like a car that is doing, I don't know how it's called in English, when the car is turning out right and left. It's like this fish turning right and left on the back end, where at some point you can control it if you're a skilled driver, but at some point physics comes in, and all of a sudden, no matter what you do in the car, this car will just turn around and you will crash, and you will be somewhere in the woods and somewhere in a tree in there with your car, because at some point physics comes in. And then the comparison to fiat is like, yes, you can control the money supply, you can control maybe inflation rate to a certain extent, but at some point physics comes in. At some point this whole thing will collapse because it's not controllable anymore.
It's like that in I think it's Ayn Rand quote. It's like you can ignore reality for as long as you like, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality.
Absolutely.
And so, this is the fiat system. This is the fiat system. You cannot have a free market in the fiat system because price evolution is only allowed in one direction for assets over the long run because it's a debt-based system. The central banks cannot allow asset prices to fall because everything implodes. They can fall a little bit, but anytime they fall too much, they have to prop them up. Again, by expanding the monetary supply, by hitting that big red button. And so it is just a one-way trade, which means it's not a free market. And you play that forward, inevitably, you get to infinite fiat. That's the only outcome. That's the only outcome in that scenario. And so if that's the only outcome with the rules of the game, and they're never going to further constrain themselves with the rules of the game, it's just a question of how long it takes till you reach infinite fiat. And if you know you're going to get there, then you've just got to own the hardest asset in the universe. And it's just a question of time. And so, yeah, I mean, the fiat system is just inherently broken and unstable.
It's almost interesting how people really hate on politicians and really hate on like, oh, what policies they do. But with politicians, at least you kind of have a vote. Like you kind of have a vote of like, who do you want in office? I mean, in America, it's a different approach because I think just two parties. I see it, especially in Europe and in Austria and in countries where there are like 3, 4, 5 parties where you actually kind of have a choice. And the biggest party only have like 25% of the votes, where you kind of really say like, okay, I want the more libertarian, economic friendly government. I want to have like maybe a green party in there. I want to have like conservatives. I want to have like right wing. Like there are like really like 5 ideological different parties in there that you can vote for. And what you vote, you usually also kind of get. That might be different in America because there's like a 2-party system that might be a little weird. But still, as central bank, we never voted for them. We don't vote on the persons that are on the central bank, and we don't vote on the policies that the central bank is doing. But we do accept them, and we only hate on politicians. Like, how does this make sense? Where we have some sort of control, we hate on them. Where we don't even have a little bit inside, a little bit control, and completely intransparent, we kind of just leave it there. Like nobody goes on the streets and protests all the Fed. Like some do, but like a very small amount.
It's a great question. I think it's the positioning of independence, perhaps. It's that politically neutral actor in the system. Whereas in politics, it's very much our team versus your team mentality. And yeah, maybe that goes some way to explain it, but it's like a lot of the EU now, especially. You never voted for any of this stuff. You're just subject to it, and there is no mechanism to leave apart from migrating. Leave Europe. That's pretty much the only way that you can escape what is happening. It is, it's evolved in quite a scary direction over the last 10 years.
100%. Where are you actually based? Are you in America or in Europe?
No, I wish I was in America. I'm in the UK, just outside London.
Okay. Why would you wish to America? You don't like UK's direction?
Oh, the UK is going in a terrible direction. I'm very, very proud to be from the UK. We are, I'm very proud to be from the UK, but we have some very, very strange ideas when it comes to thinking about the responsibilities that we have and plans for the future. It's, I look at politicians in the US and there is definitely a mixed bag, definitely a mixed bag of quality. And you may not agree with everything or anything that either side say, but what is drastically different versus the UK is that it's full of business people. The UK, we have nobody. There's nobody who's a business person in the UK government. We have, we've ended up in a situation where we have career politicians of one degree or another who have very little to no experience in the real world, let alone running a business and having to make decisions, having to allocate capital, manage people, manage risk, think about growth. In fact, instead, we've ended up with a party, and this also applies to Conservatives and Reform and others to varying degrees as well, but especially with Labour in the UK. We have ended up in just a situation where we've got 4 years of decline ahead of us, because the whole foundations on which we think about prosperity and the creation of prosperity is just totally backward. Totally backwards. To think that you could tax people into prosperity is just ludicrous. It's just ludicrous, and there is no. I mean, this is not just a Bitcoin thing, because Bitcoin is not given the foundations to succeed in the UK to the extent that it should be in the civilizational level change, within technology that it is. But even just more broadly, the wealth creators and small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses across the UK are increasingly treated as the enemy, or the cattle to extract as much out of as possible to provide resources to be poured into the black hole by the state. And there is zero accountability on the side of the state on spending. It's all about, people need to pay their fair share and these sorts of things. But, what is your fair share of what someone else worked for? Your fair share is zero of what someone else worked for. And, the best capital allocators and the best drivers of growth in any economy are the entrepreneurs, are the business people. And you should be trying to put more capital back in the hands of capital allocators to create more growth, more jobs, more prosperity, and raise the standard of living for the people in your country, rather than trying to take more out of their hands to pour into the black hole. And, that's the situation we find ourselves in. And I realize it's not just the UK, it's everywhere. But the UK, we are on a particularly dark path. And, I really hope that at some point we get somebody in the cabinet who at least has some business background experience, some real world experience in managing budgets, thinking about capital allocation and growth, and not just scoring political points and writing checks to anyone and everything.
I partnered up with Coin Vigilante. This is the most beautiful Bitcoin timepiece that I ever saw created by anyone. Look at that beauty. I love it so much. Coin Vigilante made a perfect Bitcoin watch. That's the perfect, subtle, elegant way to go out there and show that you are a Bitcoiner. And that watch brand is Bitcoin only. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece, and make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. If you watch or listen to my podcast on a regular basis, I guess you already bought some Bitcoin. And now the most important step is to keep their Bitcoin. Keep them secure in a hardware wallet. My personal recommendation for hardware wallet is the BitBox. It's super secure. It's simple to set up. It's also a perfect gift for a friend who has still their Bitcoin on an exchange. And you can get a 5% discount with the code Robin at the checkout. Visit bitbox.swiss/Robin to get your BitBox. And the next step is to really level up your sovereignty as an individual. You have to have the most secure self-custody setup. You have to secure your own devices. You have to protect your privacy. You have to set up an inheritance plan. And depending on where you live, you even want to have a plan B, a citizenship where you can move in case something goes really, really wrong. And through all those steps, the Bitcoin way is guiding you through step by step. And if you visit thebitcoinway.com/partners/Robin, you even get a 30-minute free call to find out how you can level up your sovereignty. It's always like there's some sort of cycle to it. Like there's business people and entrepreneurs that kind of build up wealth with bringing jobs and bringing prosperity to a country. And once there's a lot of prosperity in the country, people are having higher problems of like, oh, now that we're kind of wealthy, we want to have social things, we want to have equality. Like equality is, I hate that word, but like you know what I'm talking about. There's like the socialist then agenda coming in. And this then leads to policies that actually drive out the businessman and the business people and the entrepreneurs, especially those who make new companies. They're looking at that like, oh, like here I'm getting punished for creating something. At that country, I'm not getting punished. So why I'm not just starting over there when I'm getting punished here to do something? And I think that's like where there's this cycle continues of when you go in the wrong direction once and you go in the socialist direction, you are driving out a lot of capital, a lot of talent, and a lot of entrepreneurs. Those capital, entrepreneurs, and talent make sure that the next generation has wealth. If without them, everything is breaking down. Like you don't have tax money to give anyone if there are no companies there. Like that's the fundamental thing that you need in an economy and you need in a society.
100%. And this, you asked why I would want to be in America. That's why I would want to be in America. In America, from here, not America for the last 4 years, but some areas, obviously very protective of the rights of individuals and remain capitalist in the truest sense of the word that you can within a fiat system, noting all the things we talked about before, which distort all of those things. The US is set up to be the home of. I mean, it's always been the home of this, but now it's positioned as such a radically different proposition from where Europe is, from where the US is, where the UK is. Why would you not want to be there? Why would you not want to be there? And it's probably the one location in the world, and I sort of parentheses around. There are other smaller pockets around the world, but as a whole country, where you probably have the most direct link between effort and reward. As an individual, you want to have purpose, be motivated, improve the life for your family, and drive success and help people. I mean, very generally speaking. But if the mechanism for the creativity, the innovation, the effort that you put in, that mechanism between that and what comes out the other end of that, in terms of lifting the standard of living for your family and for the people around you and driving positive change, is broken, then you stop putting the effort in. And this is exactly what socialism is. Like, it just breaks that link. It breaks that link completely. You become cattle for the state rather than it's pulling people down, not lifting them up. We've pretty much given up on the pursuit of excellence in the West, especially UK and Europe. We don't celebrate success. We don't aim high. It's saying, "Oh, we need to make everybody equal, equality of outcome," which is just ludicrous. Quality of outcome is where you get with communism. If you remove people's purpose, then you destroy everything. Everything then just corrodes. So we've gone down a slightly political route here, I guess, Robin, but it's not. But it's just shocking where we are.
Do you think that Bitcoin kind of enforces a more capitalist state structure onto us anyways? Like, if is the political solution, is Bitcoin also the political solution to our problems?
Bitcoin fixes everything. Bitcoin fixes everything, Robin, because it's the peaceful opt out into a new system where, much like on Satoshi's side of the island, the whole world is working 24/7 to increase your purchasing power, and the other side is your purchasing power is getting destroyed, and that's such a no brainer. And encourage people to watch the video, because when you watch the video, it I would challenge you not to think, "Oh my God, the choice is so stark here. The choice is so obvious for absolutely everybody." They will make the leap at some point, and we need to make the gap as small as possible so they can make the smallest possible leap for the most number of people. Um, but yeah, I mean, capitalism is it shouldn't even be an ism. Capitalism is just being left alone. If you and I can trade with each other at whatever price on whatever terms we want, that's just the natural state. That's just the natural state. We don't need anybody giving us rules to be able to do that, because that's just what naturally happens. And so capitalism isn't even an ism, it's just the natural state. And it's when you start putting things in the way of capitalism, that's when you have this, an ideology of X or Y or Z or whatever. But it just fights human nature. And so, as people adopt Bitcoin, they see their purchasing power increase. They tap into this network where everybody is acting in their own self-interest for the benefit of everybody else. And it's an unstoppable system. And eventually it's just going to consume the world. And at some point, it begins to defund the governments, right? Or the governments wake up, which is the much more likely outcome, in that somebody with a brain somewhere in the government wakes up and understands, has the penny drop moment with Bitcoin, is that actually, instead of Bitcoin is not the problem, Bitcoin is the solution. It is the only solution for governments to bail themselves out from the insolvency crisis that we already know we have. We just haven't acknowledged it at at a governmental level. And when you have access to a money printer, then the natural consequence of game theory here is you use the money printer to print money to buy Bitcoin, because there's the only way out. It's the only way out. And once one country starts doing it, the floodgates will begin to open, and those that don't engage are going to get left behind. So Bitcoin is just a competitive advantage for every person, company, state, organization of any sort, right? And it's going to suck everybody in.
How did
we get to answer your question? We get back to a much smaller governmental framework, and much closer to pure capitalism, which is the thing that has lifted the quality of living for so many people around the planet, which is conveniently forgotten in these more socialist days.
I love that explanation. I loved it a lot. How did you discover that in the first place? How did you come to the conclusion that there is a problem and that Bitcoin is the right solution?
Well, far too late is with the honest answer. And so in 2020, I started going down the rabbit hole, but it's just doing the work and consuming the content, reading the books, listening to the podcast, hearing the different perspectives, and building it up from first principles, which you can only do by doing the work. Really, like the principles of economics by Seyr, just fantastic. Should be mandatory reading for absolutely everybody in schools, in economics courses, wherever, because it's almost undeniable Like, it's just so logical. The Austrian framework is just so logical, and because it's driven from human action. It's not driven from, you know, hand wavy aggregates and, relationships that are deemed, scientific when in fact they're sort of more, well, they're not scientific. Should we? Let's leave it. Let's leave it at that. But I think once you do the work and you build it, you rip it down to first principles and you build it up again. It's very clear to see. It's very clear to see, and that combined with the fact that I spent the first 10 years of my career in investment banks, I know, having been in those environments, what the mentality is. The investment banks are effectively attached one step away from the money printer.
By the way, like, maybe I should have asked that earlier, but what is actually your background? What are you currently doing besides making
Yeah,
Bitcoin videos?
we launched straight into it, didn't we? So yeah, I did physics at university, and then I became an equity derivatives trader for 10 years, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, and UBS, and then I moved into sports. So I started modeling football from soccer for Americans from a mathematical perspective, and then realized I could do that pretty well, better than some of the bookmakers could do it at the time. So left and created a quant engineering business with a partner who has a very similar background. He was an engineer, and then we wrote algorithms and real-time trading systems for supplying prices and new product to bookmakers for their customers. And then we were acquired, and we spent the last 5-6 years growing the business that acquired us from a sort of national European champion to a global player, playing a small part in that in various different guises. And yeah, but along the way found Bitcoin. And so, 12 months ago, well, 9 months ago, was able to take a step out of that business. And, I remain a shareholder, and, that business is going to do very well, but it reached the point where it was so big that my ability to influence it in a way, that added sufficient value wasn't enough. It wasn't the best use of my time, should I say? Like, especially when you found Bitcoin, because once you found Bitcoin, it's any time spent on anything else is a waste. And so that's where I find myself now, is outside of family, and maybe 5 or 10% of my time supporting people I want to see succeed from an advisory perspective. Because my last couple of years at the company that acquired us was running M&A, and co-running the venture fund that we started on balance sheet. So investing in small startups at the intersection of sports, entertainment, and technology, which was great because that's where my passion is: working with small businesses, solving problems, helping founders grow, having been through that myself, and with my financial background. And so now I continue to do that for a couple of small businesses, one in the Bitcoin space, one not in the Bitcoin space, just because I like the people, I want to help them succeed and grow. But that's like 5% of my time, maybe 10% of my time, depending on the week, and the rest is just thinking about how to solve problems in Bitcoin and moving towards creating a Bitcoin business to solve the problems in Bitcoin.
I love that. That's really cool that you found that the clarity, the focus on Bitcoin. Is that also kind of the why you made the video so professional? Like most people that do first video on something, they like just record on like a webcam, but you made it a real professional video with it.
Well, I was very fortunate to find a local videography company here who I think did a great job. Did a great job with the video. Robert, I would say it goes against my nature to be visible, I would say. So the thought of putting out a video and having it living on the internet there was a certain level I had to get over, which I had to not be embarrassed about the video. And so I thought, if I'm going to do this, I have no skills in doing this myself. I've never done anything like this. So I'll find somebody who has, and I'll have them help me create a video of good enough quality that I'm not embarrassed about it. And so that was sort of the first hurdle to get over. But I think they did a really good job. But I would say if I was doing it again, I'd be much more efficient and things would be even better. Because I mean, like simple things, Robin. I didn't have a script. I I just sort of did the presentation a couple of times and we filmed it, and then we stitched it together. And so, like, looking back at the presentation now, I'm like, oh, I should have I should have written a script beforehand, and then I could have chosen my wording in this section or that section to be slightly better. And so, little things like this, the things that you don't know about how to do things properly when you do it the first time.
You get better with if each time, and once you do it like 5-6 times, you're like, oh, like now I kind of have the hang of it. And is it kind of already my next question? Will there come more? Are you planning on doing more explaining videos, documentaries, maybe even like other things like that major?
I I have no plans to. And this was, as I said, because it was an accidental creation, and because I thought it was good, and the response was so good from people who were not Bitcoiners, who then wanted to learn about Bitcoin. I thought, okay, well, I this needs to be shared with other people, so I'll put some time and effort into creating it and then sharing it. But the idea was not to commercialize it in any way. It's free for everybody, and I'll be making all the material. We're getting out from under the flurry of emails from all around the world, and you know, over the next week or two, hopefully we can open up all the materials, the slides, the speaker notes, the transcripts in English, and then all the other languages, and everybody can then take copies of this and go and do the presentation for their friends, or take it and redesign it, or create something new with the characters, or something like that. I would love to see that sort of expansion of this, but from a community perspective, because it's not a commercial thing. And I don't see myself at the moment doing another video, but I would love other people to. If you want to create something that's got Fiatello in it, the big red button or something, yeah, great. I've had calls in the last few days with people who are creating new resources, new materials that are sort of built on top of or connected to this. Whether it's visual stuff or it's like audio stuff, like songs and things like just like crazy. We've got so many skills within the Bitcoin community, and I just would love people to get involved and run with it in whatever direction their skills take them. Um, I'm certainly not planning to create a series of videos or something like, or documentaries. No, but if you want to have a chat if anybody's listening who want to have a chat, or they've got skills in like making a cartoon or something like that, I would love to have any and all conversations to get this into as many forms as possible, so we can get everybody receiving this message across the world.
You're a true Bitcoiner. I see that. I love the spirit that you have with sharing these things. It's the same spirit I have with my podcast. People sometimes ask me, "Oh, can I take the podcast or a clip of that and share it with my audience?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course. Like that, take away. Like it's not my material. It's Bitcoin's material. Like Bitcoin owns that podcast. I'm just happen to be a host of that and asking questions. But this is I feel like I'm employed by the Bitcoin Corporation, and that it's owned by Bitcoin. This content and this podcast. Obviously, there's no corporation above me. It's legally just me, but that's how I look at it. And every other Bitcoiner who wants maybe sees a small clip and wants to share this in his audience, they can just take it and share it. If you want to use it commercially, use it. Like I don't have any, like I don't claim any rights on my podcast, and I just like to contribute something to the Bitcoin community. And I think that's the true spirit of Satoshi. He came into this world, created Bitcoin, didn't take any credit, didn't take any money, and went away. Like that's the true spirit of Satoshi.
Absolutely, and you see it throughout the Bitcoin community. And a great example here, Robin, is that since launching it, we're now on 22, 23 languages in translations. They're all volunteers. These are just Bitcoiners around the world who have seen this and said, "Can I please translate this into my local language?" And we've probably got I'm sure we'll hit 30 languages in the next week or 2 weeks with all things in flight. It just means we can get it into more hands. But everyone's doing this for free. Like, I'm doing it for free. It's costing me money to, do the video and have the website and the tools and all of these things. But it's like it's the resource for everybody. And so everyone is Bitcoin's one of those things where the purpose of it is bigger than you. I think Bitcoin brings out the best in people. It's everything the world just feels brighter, and you're more optimistic once that penny has dropped with Bitcoin.
Absolutely. How did you look at like how was for you the reaction, the response of the Bitcoin community to your video? It was kind of like you're welcome to the community.
I mean, I think the smile says it all. It's just been amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Like the number of DMs and comments and emails and yeah, just fantastic. Just fantastic because what's in the video is there's nothing new in the video. Like I don't think you'd have watched the video and be like, "Oh, I didn't know that." You know, it it's what we all have in our heads. It's what we all carry in our heads, but it's just delivered in a really accessible framework that saves us having to figure out how to try and communicate with people who haven't even been tapped on the shoulder yet. And I feel like, I've had so many nice messages from people where it's been like this relationship unlock for them. It's things like I've sent it to my dad. I've been trying to get him to learn about Bitcoin for 3 years and he's never bothered. He saw this video and now he wants the Bitcoin standard. You know, I've shared this with I watched this with my daughter and she's a teenager and then we had the best conversation we've ever had. And she understands now why I'm so passionate about Bitcoin. But it's like, you would be, just like a little missing piece in the jigsaw that helps bridge the normal world to where we are. And it's not the last step by any means. Other people will create other content, which makes it even easier. But it's like, giving every Bitcoiner a tool in their pocket that they can just, their go-to resource when they have the opportunity to just very gently help someone get to the starting line. They send this, they watch the video, and then they send them Broken Money by Lynn Alden, or Talk by Alex Gladstein, or a Michael Saylor video, or any of the other 10 or 15 people or books and resources that people tend to go to depending on what their preference is. And it just makes onboarding so much easier. And so yeah, the biggest thing for me is like I really like it that people have watched the video, but the biggest thing is hearing that it's helped other people get to the starting line. That's just amazing. So the more people can see it, the more people we can get to the starting line, and the Bitcoin bubble just grows even faster.
I love that. I have one question that I ask each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
What can you learn from me besides Bitcoin? I don't know. When you say that, the first thing that comes to my head is that meme where you see all the words in someone's head, and it's like Bitcoin, and there's like a tiny space for anything else. What can we learn? I think, and I guess this is more of a. It's not a thing. It's more of a action. In that Bitcoin, there'll be lots of people listening to this who are fully orange pilled, but they're still living in fiat world, and they'll have known in their minds that they're already fully Bitcoin, but they're in fiat world still, probably trapped in some way through financial constraints, obligations, running a business or something. And I would encourage everybody to think about what the small things they can do every day are to help move us towards a world where everybody has Bitcoin. Because we all know that time is coming. And you may not be able to leave your fiat job. You may not be able to dedicate a huge amount of time each day to doing something in Bitcoin, but there's something you can do in the small actions that you have every day, in the way that you carry yourself, the conversations that you have, to help further the ability of people to make that leap to Bitcoin. And it could be sharing the video, it could be other things. It could just be every time you go into a shop, just say, can I pay in Bitcoin? The answer, the answer 99.9% of the time is going to be no. But the fact that you asked, and if we all ask, then eventually the shopkeeper's going to be, there's a lot of people asking to pay in Bitcoin. Maybe I should look into this thing. It's just like those small actions every day, even if you're trapped in fiat. And beyond that, I would also say, there's a very long answer to your question, Robin. I hope you don't mind. The other one is, because Bitcoin is still so small, like once you're in it, you feel like surely everybody gets this. But like Bitcoin is so small, in terms of the number of people actively involved in the little ecosystem. But we have lots of sleeper agents around the world. And this has been very clear to me over the last couple of weeks, because I got emails from every corner of the world for people who are basically Bitcoiners trapped in fiat businesses or with no other Bitcoiners that they know, etc., etc. Like they're everywhere. They're everywhere. But if you think about the Venn diagram of people who understand Bitcoin, I understand Bitcoin as close to understanding Bitcoin as you are at your point in the journey, and your skill set. The overlap in those two circles in the Venn diagram is very, very small. Very small. So you may be a chemical engineer, or you may be a haulier, or you've got some professional or educational background or knowledge of some area, right? And there's probably a lot of people in the world who do. But there's very few people in the world who do, but also get Bitcoin. And so that makes you very special. And if you think about where the world is going, the world is going to Bitcoin. So you are incredibly well positioned to make a real difference in that intersection of the Venn diagram. So start thinking about how, given your skill set, your background, how you think the future of that may evolve as Bitcoin eats the world. Think about the things that you can do to A, accelerate that, and B, take advantage of that. Because by taking advantage of that, you're helping Bitcoin grow into your subsector, your subsector of knowledge or industry, and we all get there faster. And you have a competitive advantage, so use it. Bitcoin is the greatest free market that will ever exist, and if we all act in our own self-interest, it benefits everybody.
And I love the message that those small actions can actually make a huge difference in the long run and in the bigger picture. Because people think like, oh, like if I just ask if I can pay in Bitcoin, what will it change? They just get annoyed. But even if they get annoyed, even if they act weirdly, which they probably won't, if they are nice people, and most people are nice, I feel like, um, they are aware of that you wanted to pay with Bitcoin. And if the next week, on another day, on another time, another guest comes in and says the same thing, and this happens over and over again, at some point the waitress says, hey, boss, there are people coming in and asking more and more about if they can pay in Bitcoin. And then maybe there are people out there selling like lightning point of sales things. Maybe they already talked with the restaurant owner, and the restaurant owner like, yeah, like there was some guy here that can do that. And maybe the 3-4 guests that came in and said like, oh, we want to pay with Bitcoin, and the one guy that said like, oh, I know how to get you onboarded, is enough for the restaurant owner to call the guy back and like, hey, can you set up Bitcoin payments here?
Yeah.
And that's the grassroots movement we need. Like we need people to work on all levels, and kind of try to orange pill the world in that way. And just a simple question of like, oh, can I also pay in Bitcoin here, or do you prefer card? Like it's like a small question. Like leave them an easy out. Like if you just bring Bitcoin in there and just was like, yeah, like I would like to pay with Bitcoin, but also card is possible if Bitcoin is not an option here. Like you don't have to be an asshole about it.
No, and we absolutely shouldn't be, right? Because Bitcoin is for anybody, but it absolutely does that. You have to be touched multiple times by Bitcoin to really engage, and it varies. But it's a conversation starter as well, Robin. And Bitcoiners love talking about Bitcoin. So, every time where it's appropriate to talk about Bitcoin, inject Bitcoin into the conversation, do it. Because you never know, the person on the other end might be a Bitcoiner already, right? They might own a bit, or they might be interested to learn a bit more, and you can send them in the right direction. It's like these small actions every day.
The way was the local film crew Orange Pill, or did you do that?
I think we probably are now. Now they again, like, most people have no clue. We're so early. We're so early.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really cool. Perfect. And thank you, Joe. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And yeah.
Okay. I should really have watched the last podcast then. I have no idea what this.
Yeah, like the question is always anyway secret because like I ask offline, so you have no way of knowing the question. I'm telling you. The question is, if you were the president of your country, would you print money to buy Bitcoin in secret?
I need to buy Bitcoin in secret. That is a great question. I would say, Robert, it's not like we have much transparency at the moment anyway, right? So it could well be happening. I mean, I'm almost certain it's not because we're not switched on enough in the UK, unfortunately. But you don't get the transparency anyway, right? So it's not like you'd have to make a decision outside of the current framework to deliberately hide it from people, right? And secondly, it's the economically rational thing to do once you've discovered Bitcoin. But I think importantly, it's what happens after, which is the key thing. Because by printing money, you're effectively stealing from the population. But in the same way that Michael Saylor is tapping into the financing glitch. As soon as a government starts printing money to buy Bitcoin, it strengthens the country because you're diluting your currency, you're debasing the currency, but you're putting an asset on the balance sheet, which is the hardest asset that will ever exist. And so you're making your country more prosperous by doing so. So I think the question becomes, like, what do you then do? What do you then do? Do you put it as a strategic reserve for the country and to make sure that you have a governance structure around that to make sure it then can't be abused or wasted by the country? But it's economically a rational thing to do because you don't move the market, you don't tell the market. And it's morally the right thing to do, arguably, because there's better use. There's more value in the fiat equivalent Bitcoin than there is in the fiat. But it's important. You can only state that it's morally positive if you have a governance framework around it that the benefit then accrues back to the population somehow. So I've said before that the strategic Bitcoin reserve for any country should be the Bitcoin that its population holds, not what the government holds. And so
That's the real way, yeah. I love
that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be because the government, the way it's meant to work is the government draws its power from the population. And so if your population owns Bitcoin, then the power of that accrues to the government through the population. And so yeah, I think the argument would be print fiat currency to buy Bitcoin, and then put that Bitcoin in the hands of everyone in the population, not on the balance sheet of the central bank.
I love that answer. That's really good. Thank you so much, Joe. Before I let you go, we already showed the video where people where can people see the video. Where else can people find you and ask questions and reach out to you?
Yeah, well, I'm on X at SatmoJoe, and you can also find the video. There's links on YouTube and on X to take you to Sats versus Fiat, which is the home of where the video is. There's extra resources for follow-on. So once you watch the video, if you're interested to learn more about Bitcoin, there's a series of follow-on videos created by some wonderful contributors of various types. So there will be something there that piques your interest, as well as some books, videos and books. we'll probably add some podcasts as well in time. And there's also the ability to get involved if you're a Bitcoiner. Maybe you want to support, maybe you've got translating skills, or you'd like to go and get a copy of the presentation to then give to your family and friends or your work colleagues, wherever you are in the world. Or maybe you just want to be on a long list. So if somebody calls up and says, there's a company in Argentina that wants a presentation, we've got people in Argentina that can go and give the presentation to the people in person. So don't be shy of getting involved. The ask is very low. We'll add you to the list and we'll figure out how we're going to sort of mobilize the volunteers into something which hopefully can get this message across as many eyeballs as possible around the world. And yeah, I'd just love to talk to people. So get in touch. And yeah, Robin, thanks ever for having me on. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope people at home have enjoyed it as well. And I hope they watch the video if they haven't already, and then share it with people.
Thank you so much, Joe. I think it already is a great successful video, and I think it will be an even bigger one in the future. Thank you so much for taking time. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.